The rain on the day I was thrown away didn't fall. It wept. Each drop that hit my skin felt like a cold, silent tear from a sky that understood what my own mother could not. I stood at the edge of everything I'd ever known, the scent of damp pine from the Sterling Pack territory at my back, and the scent of nothing at all ahead of me. The neutral ground, the place you go when you belong nowhere. My name is Ilara Vance. For 24 years, that name meant disappointment. My bag, a sad canvas duffel, lay at my feet, its broken zipper a testament to how little I was allowed to take, how little I had. 10 feet away, my mother, Celeste Vance, alpha of the Sterling Pack, was a statue carved from ice and ambition. Her tailored trench coat was spotless, her heels pristine despite the mud. This wasn't a farewell. It was an execution, and she was the impeccably dressed warden. "Do you understand the terms, Ilara?" Her voice wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was empty, a flat administrative sound. "This isn't exile, it's a reassignment, a transfer of assets to settle a debt." A debt. My existence was a ledger entry, the final humiliating line item. I dug my nails into my palms, the sharp pain a familiar anchor. Crying meant weakness. Showing emotion meant proving her right, that I was too soft, too broken, too much and yet not enough. My wolf, the part of me that should have roared to life at puberty, was a silent, sleeping thing, a dormant failure in a body my mother constantly reminded me was too large, too unrefined for a daughter of her line. "I understand," I said. The words tasted like ash. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to be packaged and shipped like defective goods, to have your worth calculated and found wanting, then listen closely. Because my story doesn't start with a grand romance or a fated meeting. It starts here, in the gray drizzle with my mother's final act of disposal. She didn't even look at me when she delivered the final blow. "The Triplet alphas of the Shadowfen pack have agreed to take you. Consider it restitution for the embarrassment your condition has caused, for the resources wasted." Restitution, condition. The words were clinical scalpels, cutting the last fragile threads between us. She turned then, without another word, and walked back toward the Sterling border. The pack members she'd brought as witnesses fell into step behind her. Not a single one looked back. I was erased from their landscape, just like that. The silence after they left was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on my entire life. I was alone, truly, completely alone for the first time. The weight of it pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the soft curve of my stomach, the very shape my mother despised, and tried to find a reason to stand up straight. Headlights sliced through the weeping mist. 3 sets of lights, moving in a tight predatory formation. My heart, which had been a dull, heavy stone in my chest, suddenly became a wild, frantic bird. They were here, the Triplet alphas of Shadowfen, men spoken of in hushed, fearful tones, ruthless, isolated, unforgiving. My mother's final punishment had arrived in a convoy of black SUVs. The vehicle stopped, engines purring like contented beasts. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happened. The fog swirled around them, hiding their occupants. It felt like a test. Were they waiting for me to approach, to kneel? Then the doors opened in unison. The first man who stepped out stole the air from my lungs. He was tall, built like the ancient trees behind me, with hair the color of dark earth and eyes that caught the gloom and reflected back a sharp, intelligent light. He moved with an alpha's inherent command, each step deliberate. He was the calm before the storm. The second emerged from the lead vehicle. His expression was a thundercloud, jaw tight, eyes scanning the perimeter as if expecting a trap. Where the first was still water, this one was a coiled spring. The third closed the door of the rear SUV softly. He didn't look around. He looked directly at me. His gaze was a physical weight, pinning me in place. It wasn't aggressive, but it was utterly inescapable. Triplets. identical in their formidable power, yet each radiating a different kind of danger. The rumors hadn't done them justice. The first one, the calm one, approached. He stopped a respectful distance, close enough that I caught his scent, aged leather, winter frost, and something wild, something deeply and fundamentally wolf. "Alara Vance," he voiced, a low rumble, steady as bedrock, not unkind. "Yes," I managed, my voice a fragile thread. "I'm Kalen Shadowfen." He gestured with a slight tilt of his head. "My brothers, Ronan and Silas." Ronan, the thundercloud, let his gaze travel over me. I braced for the sneer, the disgusted once-over I was so accustomed to. It didn't come. Instead, his nostrils flared slightly, and his brow furrowed in what looked like confusion. Kalen's next question was so utterly bizarre it broke through my panic. "When did you last eat?" I blinked. "Eat? Food," he said as if explaining to a child. "When did you last have a proper meal?" The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. I'd been abandoned at a border, sold off to savage alphas, and he was concerned about my diet? 24 hours ago, I whispered, the truth pulled from me. He gave a single firm nod. "We'll fix that." Then Silas moved. He walked past me, not toward me, but to my pathetic duffel bag. He picked it up as if it weighed nothing. "Wait," I said, a spark of defiance igniting in my chest. "I can carry my own things." He paused, looked at the bag in his hand, then at me. Without a word, he set it gently back on the wet ground and took 2 steps back, raising his palm slightly, a gesture of peace or surrender. A rough sound came from Ronan. It might have been a laugh. "She's got fire in her. Good." "You're going to need it," Kalen said, his eyes holding mine. There was no malice in the statement. It was a simple, grim fact. Nothing was going as I'd steeled myself for. There was no violence, no immediate degradation. This careful, almost clinical attention was somehow more unnerving. It was like being examined by predators who hadn't decided if you were prey. "Get in the middle vehicle," Kalen instructed. It was not a request. My legs, numb with fear and cold, carried me to the SUV. Silas held the door open. I climbed in, the leather seat cold against my skin. Kalen took the driver's seat. Ronan and Silas returned to their own vehicles. The convoy turned, a synchronized beast, and began to move. I watched out the window as the sterling border markers faded into the mist. No one called after me. No one cared. I was gone. We drove in silence for what felt like hours. The drone of the engine, the rhythmic swipe of the wipers, the gray world rushing by, it all blended into a numb haze. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a deep, hollow exhaustion in its wake. "You're shivering," Kalen observed from the front seat. "I'm fine." He didn't argue. He just reached over and turned up the heat. Warm air washed over me, and I hated how comforting it felt. Hated that this small, simple act of care from a stranger made my eyes burn. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, my voice small in the quiet car. "Home." "That's not my home." His eyes found mine in the rearview mirror. The intensity there made me catch my breath. "It is now." The words should have felt like a prison sentence. Instead, they felt like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. Dangerous, uncertain, but the only thing to hold on to. "We're not what you think we are, Alara," he said after another stretch of silence. "You don't know what I think." "I can smell your fear," he said, matter-of-factly. "You think we're going to hurt you, break you, use you." I said nothing. He was right.
"We're not. Then what are you going to do with me?" The question hung between us, charged and desperate. Kalen was quiet for a long time, his hands steady on the wheel, his gaze fixed on the road unwinding before us. The silence stretched so thin I thought it would snap. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer. "We're going to find out who you really are, and we're going to keep you safe until you do." Safe. The word was a foreign currency. I didn't know how to spend it or if it was even real. I turned back to the window, watching the blurred world, my mind a whirlwind of dread and a terrifying, fragile sliver of something I refused to name as hope. The convoy pulled off the highway into a lonely rest stop, its fluorescent lights a harsh island in the sea of night. This was it, I thought, the neutral ground, where the transaction would be finalized, where the real punishment would begin. The engines cut off, doors opened. I stayed frozen in my seat until Kaylin's voice, calm and inevitable, cut through the silence. Out, Alara. This is where the story truly begins. Not with love, but with a choice made in a rainy parking lot. My choice to stop being a victim, and their choice to see something in me that no one else ever had. The rest stop lights were a sickly yellow, painting the wet asphalt in oily streaks. I climbed out of the SUV, my muscles stiff, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The three alphas formed a loose triangle around me, not trapping me, but containing the space. Ronan stood with his arms crossed, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Silas lingered near the rear of the vehicles, a silent sentinel. Kaylin faced me, his expression unreadable. "We need to clarify something," Kaylin began, his voice cutting through the hum of a distant highway. "Before we go any further." Here it comes, I thought. The rules, the demands, the list of my failures and how I would atone for them. "You are not property," he said, and the words were so utterly unexpected they seemed to hang in the mist, glowing. Then why did that Ice Queen call it a debt settlement? Because Celeste Vance is a liar, and we are not participants in her deceptions. My mind stumbled, trying to find footing on this new, unstable ground. Then what am I? The question was a whisper, torn from a place of profound confusion. "That," said a low voice from behind me. Silas. I hadn't heard him move. He didn't look down at me, he just saw me, with an intensity that made me feel transparent. "You're terrified," he observed. It wasn't an accusation. "Wouldn't you be?" I shot back, a spark of my earlier defiance flaring. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Yes, I would be." The honesty disarmed me. Alphas didn't admit to fear, they conquered it. Yet Silas said it as simply as noting the rain. Ronan took a step forward, his movement sharp. He stopped closer now, and I caught his scent, crackling ozone and granite, sharper than Kaylin's frost. It made the dormant thing inside me, my wolf, twitch in its sleep. "Your scent is wrong," Ronan said bluntly. I flinched. I'd heard variations of that my whole life. Wrong shape, wrong presence, wrong daughter. "Ronan," Kaylin warned, a low growl edging his tone. "I'm not insulting her," Ronan snapped, his eyes still on me, analytical and fierce. "I'm stating a fact. It's muted, suppressed, smothered, like something's been keeping it under." His gaze dropped to the pocket of my worn jacket. "What's in there?" My hand flew to the small, hard shape of the pill bottle. A habit, a lifeline. "Nothing." "It's not nothing," Ronan pressed. "Let me see it." "No. I'm not asking to take them. I'm asking to look." "Why?" The word was a desperate shield. "Because if I'm right," Ronan said, his voice dropping into something dangerously quiet, "your mother hasn't just been neglecting you, she's been poisoning you since you were a child." The world tilted, the fluorescent lights buzzed louder. Poison. Not medicine for my condition, but poison. The little light pills I'd swallowed every morning for as long as I can remember, under my mother's cold, watchful eye. Kaylin's presence shifted, growing heavier, darker. "Alara, if Ronan is correct, those pills are what's keeping your wolf dormant. That isn't just suppression, it's a death sentence for your true nature, and that makes you a target." "A target?" I choked out. Silas answered from my other side, his voice a calm contrast to the storm building inside me. "An unawakened Omega your age is seen as vulnerable, weak. To other packs, you're an open challenge, a prize to be taken or a problem to be removed. Your mother didn't just send you away. She sent you out defenseless into a world that will see you as prey." The pieces, ugly and sharp, began to click together. Her coldness, the pills, the public humiliation of this transfer. She hadn't been trying to make me normal, she'd been keeping me weak, and when that became inconvenient, she'd thrown me to the wolves, hoping they'd finish what she started. A sob clawed its way up my throat, but I swallowed it, turning it into a shudder. With a hand that trembled violently, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small plastic bottle. The label was faded, the writing smudged. Ronan took it carefully. He held it up to the harsh light, shook it, then uncapped it and sniffed the contents. His face hardened into something truly frightening. Wolfsbane extract, he hissed. Diluted, microdosed, a slow, quiet cage for your wolf. He snapped the bottle in his fist. Plastic cracked. Tiny white pills scattered across the wet asphalt like worthless seeds. "You're done with these," he stated, dropping the shattered pieces. I stared at the pills dissolving in the rainwater, my past, my routine, my supposed medicine, washing away into an oily gutter. I felt unmoored, terrified, and yet, beneath the terror, a terrifying, wild sense of relief. As if a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten its presence had suddenly been lifted. "What happens now?" My voice was barely audible. "Now," Kalen said, his tone shifting back to that practical steadiness, "we get you real food. Then we drive through the night to a place where you can be safe while we figure this out." Safe from what? The three alphas exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them in an instant. "From everyone," Kalen said finally, "who will want you once they realize what's been hidden inside you all this time." Before I could demand to know what he meant, he gestured toward the rundown diner attached to the rest stop. "Go inside. Sit. Order anything. We'll handle things out here." The diner was a capsule of faded chrome and sticky vinyl. A waitress with weary eyes looked up as I entered, her gaze sliding past me to the three imposing figures following me in. She didn't speak, just pointed a coffee pot toward a corner booth. Kalen guided me to the seat facing the door, with a view of the parking lot. Ronan slid in beside me, a wall of tense muscle, while Kalen and Silas took the other side. We were boxed in, protected. The menus arrived. Ronan took mine before I could even open it. "She'll have the full breakfast platter, twice, and a glass of whole milk, and coffee." He looked at his brothers. "We'll all have the same." "I can't eat that much," I protested, heat rising to my face. "You've been starving on poison and anxiety," Ronan said, not unkindly, but with absolute certainty. "Your body needs fuel to heal, to wake up." The food arrived quickly, plates heaped with eggs, bacon, pancakes, hash browns. The smell was overwhelming, a greasy, delicious aroma that made my stomach clench with sudden ravenous hunger. I waited for the familiar internal voice, my mother's voice, telling me to take small bites, to show restraint, to remember my place. It didn't come.
Instead, Kalen picked up his fork and began to eat. Silas followed. Ronan nudged the syrup toward me. It wasn't permission, it was normality. They were just eating. So I ate. Slowly at first, then with a growing urgency that had nothing to do with manners and everything to do with a deep cellular need. I ate until the edges of the fear began to blur, until the food was a warm, solid anchor in my swirling reality. No one spoke. They just ate, a unit of quiet efficiency, their attention subtly divided between the meal, the door, the windows, and me. When I finally pushed my plate away, genuinely full for the first time in memory, Kalen nodded. "Better?" "Yes," I admitted. "Good." He left more than enough cash on the table and stood. "We have a long drive ahead. You should try to sleep." Back in the SUV, the world once again became a dark river flowing past the windows. The meal sat heavily, warmly in my stomach. The exhaustion, held back by adrenaline and terror, rushed in like a tide. Kalen's scent of frost and leather filled the car, strangely calming. "Sleep, Alara," he said softly from the front seat. "You're safe for now." I didn't want to. Trust was a luxury that came with too high a price. but my body betrayed me. My eyelids grew leaden. The hum of the tires became a lullaby. Against my will, against all reason, I slid into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke to a different world. Gone were the flat, endless highways. Now, monstrous shapes loomed outside the window, towering so high they seemed to hold up the sky itself. Redwoods, ancient, silent, and awe-inspiring. Their scent flooded the car, rich, damp earth and timeless wood. "Welcome to Northern California," Ronan's voice came from the vehicle behind us. I could see him in the side mirror. Shadowfen territory. We were deep in the forest, on a winding road that seemed carved by nature rather than men. The convoy moved with purpose. Occasionally, a truck would pass going the other way. The drivers would lift a hand in greeting, their eyes flicking to our vehicles with recognition and respect. "They're staring," I murmured. "They're curious," Kaylin corrected. "We don't bring outsiders here, especially not Omegas." "Why not?" "Because unmated, unclaimed Omegas are rare, and one who arrives under these circumstances—" He paused. "It raises questions." "You mean it makes me look broken?" Kaylin's hands tightened on the wheel. "It makes you look valuable, and that makes you a target. Your mother knew that. Sending you away unclaimed and suppressed was like setting a wounded fawn loose in a forest of wolves." The truth of it was a cold knife. She hadn't just discarded me, she'd painted a target on my back. The forest suddenly opened. The lodge appeared not as a building, but as an extension of the wilderness itself, built from massive logs and riverstone, with a wide, welcoming porch and smoke curling from a great stone chimney. It looked both impenetrable and like a sanctuary. It was nothing like the cold, manicured estate I'd grown up in. This was a living, breathing heart of a pack. As the SUVs rolled to a stop, people emerged from the lodge and surrounding cabins. Dozens of them, their attention focused intently on our vehicle, on me. My breath hitched. "They're all looking." "They're protective," Kaylin said, shutting off the engine. "You're a new scent in their den, but they will not harm you." He turned to look at me, his gray eyes serious. "Because anyone who tries will answer to me." The door beside me opened. Silas stood there offering a hand not to take mine, but to help me out if I needed it. I climbed out on my own, my legs wobbly. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of pine, wood smoke, and pack, a tapestry of individual wolves woven into a single, powerful community. An older woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair woven into a braid came down the porch steps. She ignored the alphas and came straight to me. "You must be Alara," she said, her voice warm like honey. "I'm Maeve. I keep these boys and this lodge from falling apart." She looked me up and down, not judging, but assessing. "You look dead on your feet. Let's get you settled." She led me inside, with Silas following carrying my duffel. The interior was all warm wood, soft rugs, and worn, comfortable furniture. It felt lived in, loved. Maeve took me upstairs to a room at the end of a hall. She opened the door. It was beautiful. A large bed with a thick quilt, a window seat overlooking the endless forest, bookshelves, a desk, my own bathroom. It was more space, more comfort than I'd ever been given. "The floors in this wing are reinforced," Maeve said casually, watching me take it in. "Solid as a rock. No creaking, so you don't have to worry about disturbing anyone." It took me a moment to understand. She wasn't talking about noise. She was telling me the floor could hold my weight, that I could walk freely here, that I could exist here without apology. A wave of emotion, so sudden and violent it stole my breath, crashed over me. Tears, hot and silent, spilled down my cheeks. I tried to wipe them away, to apologize. "Oh, child," Maeve whispered, and before I knew it, she had gathered me into a hug. She smelled of lavender and baking bread. It was the smell of safety, of motherhood, of a kind I'd never known. I clung to her, shaking, as a lifetime of held-back sorrow and loneliness broke free. When the storm passed, I was hollowed out, yet somehow fuller. Maeve smoothed my hair. You rest now. This is your room, your space. You take up as much of it as you need. She and Silas left, closing the door softly behind them. I was alone, but for the first time, alone didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like a gift. I walked to the window and watched the sunset paint the redwoods and fire. Deep in the forest, a howl rose, long and clear, then another answering it. And in the deepest part of my soul, where the poison had finally cleared, something stirred. Not my wolf, not yet, but something older, a longing, a recognition. It sounded like a welcome. Silence in the lodge was a living thing. It wasn't the empty, echoing silence of the Sterling estate, but a deep, peaceful quiet, broken only by the crackle of the great fireplace below and the occasional creak of ancient timber settling. In my room, wrapped in the profound comfort of the quilt, I should have slept, but my mind was a trapped bird beating against the cage of this impossible reality. The shattered pill bottle, Ronan's current diagnosis, the staggering kindness of a meal without judgment, Maeve's hug, they were pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit the picture of my life. I was the unwanted omega, the burden. Why would these powerful, feared alphas treat me like something precious? A low murmur of voices drifted up through the floorboards, not an argument, but a tense, urgent conference. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The voices were too muffled to make out words, but the tone was clear. Trouble. I crept down a few steps, staying in the shadows. Filed in Massachusetts an hour ago. That's a new voice, male, authoritative. Celeste Vance is claiming mental incompetence and coercion. She's petitioning for immediate return. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp. Kaylin's voice, a controlled growl. She has no grounds. We have the medical suppression evidence.
On paper, Marcus, Ronan interjected, his tone sharp as flint. But she has Eastern judges in her pocket. She can spin a story about us kidnapping a vulnerable Omega for her latent anchor potential. Anchor potential. The term hung in the air, buzzing with unspoken significance. The new man, Marcus, replied, which is why we need to move faster. We need Ilara examined by a neutral council physician. We need to formally document the wolfsbane poisoning and her awakening status. Without that, Helena's narrative has traction. Her wolf isn't fully awake yet, Silas's quiet voice pointed out. The suppression was severe. It's stirring, but it's not present. Then we buy time, Kaylin declared. File for a continuance. Request a change of venue. We fight her in the system while we help Ilara find her strength. And if the system fails, Ronan demanded. The pause that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken implications. Then Kaylin spoke, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. Then we stop playing by their rules. I'd heard enough, more than enough. My mother wasn't finished with me. She was using the law, the very institutions that should have protected me, to drag me back into her gilded cage. And my presence here was putting the Shadowfen pack, these strangers who had shown me more kindness in hours than my own family had in a lifetime, in legal and perhaps physical danger. The decision crystallized with cold, sharp clarity. I couldn't stay. I retreated to my room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I wouldn't be the cause of their ruin. I would leave before dawn, disappear into the neutral territories. It was what I was good at, being invisible, being no one's problem. I was packing my meager belongings back into the duffel when a soft knock sounded at the door. I froze, guilt flooding me. "Come in." It was Silas. He stood in the doorway, his eyes going immediately from my face to the half-packed bag on the bed. He didn't look surprised. He simply stepped inside and closed the door. "You heard," he stated. There was no point lying. Yes. He leaned against the door, a silent, watchful barrier. "And you think leaving solves this? I think staying makes it worse. She'll use you to get to me. She'll destroy your pack standing. I won't let that happen." "Your mother," Silas said slowly, "is a toxin. Running from a toxin doesn't cure the poisoning. It just lets it spread to new ground." He pushed off the door and took a step toward me, not threatening, but closing the distance.
You are not responsible for her actions, and you are not a burden to us. How can you say that? You don't even know me. I know you stood in the rain and refused to cry. I know you ate a meal while terrified because your body needed it. I know you look at this room not as a prize, but as a puzzle you don't feel you deserve. His gaze was unwavering. His words unraveled my resolve. They saw too much. She'll never stop, I whispered, the defeat in my voice startling even to me. Then we stop her, Silas replied, simple as that. A sudden, piercing howl ripped through the night outside. It wasn't the earlier welcoming calls. This was a blade of sound, sharp, urgent, a clear alarm. It was echoed instantly from another direction and another until the forest itself seemed to scream a warning. Silas was at the window in a flash. Perimeter breach. His voice lost all its quiet softness, turning hard and flat. Eastern tree line. Seconds later, the door burst open. Kaylin and Ronan filled the doorway, their expressions transformed. This was not the calm alpha or the sharp-tongued brother. These were warriors, their wolfish knights blazing just beneath the surface. Downstairs, now, Kaylin ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Maeve is in the safe room. Go. But now, Ilara, Ronan barked. I ran, my duffel forgotten. Silas was right behind me, a solid presence at my back. The main room of the lodge was a sudden flurry of controlled chaos. Pack members I hadn't met were moving with grim purpose, securing shutters, checking weapons. Maeve appeared from a hallway, ushering two younger pack members to a heavy metal door set into the stone wall near the kitchen. Kaylin grabbed a rifle from a locked cabinet, his movements fluid and precise. Ronan took a handgun, checking the chamber with a chilling familiarity. Who is it? Silas asked, taking a position by the window. Not sure, groaned Ronan. 3 cents, maybe 4. Eastern, but mercenary, no clear pack allegiance. They're here for her, Kaylin stated, his eyes finding mine across the room. In them, I saw no fear, only a cold, terrifying certainty. Get to the safe room. Another howl, this one much closer, right at the edge of the clearing. It was echoed by a savage snarl from the woods, Shadowfen patrol wolves engaging. I took a step toward the safe room, then stopped. The memory of the gun in my hand at the border, the feel of the trigger, the shocking power of it, it hadn't made me feel strong. It had made me feel desperate. But staying here, hiding while others fought for me, felt like a different kind of surrender. Give me a weapon, I said. The words were out before I could think. All 3 brothers turned to stare at me. You don't have a wolf to fight with, Ronan said, incredulous. Then I'll fight without one, I shot back, the spark of defiance I thought had died flaring back to life. Show me how to defend myself or get out of my way. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a slow, fierce smile spread across Kaylin's face. It was a predator smile, full of approval. He moved to the cabinet, pulled out a smaller, sleek handgun, and checked it with expert efficiency. He engaged the safety and held it out to me. It's already loaded. Safety is on. Point, disengage the safety, and squeeze. Don't jerk. His eyes held mine. You stay behind us. You do not engage unless you have no other choice. If I tell you to run, you run to the safe room and you lock the door. Is that understood? The weight of the gun in my hand was both terrifying and solid. Understood. We moved to the front door. Kaylin looked at his brothers, a silent communication passing between them. He gave a sharp nod. He threw the door open. 4 wolves stood in the clearing, their coats matted, their eyes glowing with a feral, hired malice. They were big, scarred, and they fanned out with a tactical awareness that spoke of training, not just wild instinct. The largest one, a brute with a ragged ear, shifted. Bones cracked and reformed in the grotesque, fascinating dance of transformation. A naked, tattooed man stood in his place, his body a map of violence. Ilara Vance, he called, his voice a gravelly scrape. Your mother sent us to bring you home. Come quietly, and no one here has to die. The lie was so bold it stole my breath. She sent them to kill, not to retrieve. You're trespassing on Shadowfen land, Kaylin's voice rang out, steady and absolute. Turn and leave. This is your only warning. The mercenary laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. We have a court order. We're just enforcing it. Your paper means nothing here, Ronan snarled, stepping forward. Leave or we'll add your pelts to our collection. The mercenary's smile vanished. Have it your way. He shifted back in a blur of motion. As one, the four wolves lunged. Chaos erupted. Kaelin and Ronan shifted mid-stride, their clothes shredding as massive wolves, one dark gray, one tawny brown, exploded toward the attackers. Silas didn't shift. He raised his gun and fired two precise shots, not at the wolves, but at the tree line behind them. Two yelps of pain answered. He'd hit hidden flankers I never even saw. It was a brutal, efficient ballet of violence. Kaelin's wolf met the leader head-on, a collision of muscle and fury. Ronan took on two, his movements a furious whirlwind of teeth and claws. Silas kept his gun trained, providing lethal cover. I stood frozen in the doorway, the gun a cold, useless weight in my hand. I was a spectator to a primal war, utterly out of my depth. Then one of the wolves, a smaller and faster one, broke away from Ronan's onslaught. It bypassed the fighting alphas entirely, its glowing eyes locked on me. It charged. Time slowed. I saw the saliva dripping from its jaws, the intent to kill in its gaze. I saw Silas swing his gun toward it, but he was too far. I saw Kaelin, locked in his own deadly struggle, turn his head and roar a warning that was pure fury and fear. My body moved without my mind's permission. I raised the gun. The world narrowed to the sight at the end of the barrel, the beast bearing down on me. I fumbled for the safety, my slick thumb sliding off once, twice. It found the switch. Click. The wolf was 10 feet away, leaping. I squeezed the trigger. The recoil was a violent shock, wrenching my arm back. The crack of the shot was deafening. The wolf yelped, a high-pitched sound of surprise and pain, and crashed to the ground at my feet, skidding in the dirt. It writhed once, then lay still. I stared, numb. The gun smoked in my hand. The sounds of the fight, the snarls, the impacts, seemed to fade into a muffled roar. I had done it. I had shot a living thing to save my life. The remaining mercenary wolves, seeing their companion fall and the unwavering ferocity of the Shadowfen alphas, broke. They disengaged, turning to flee into the dark forest. Ronan made to give chase, but a sharp, commanding bark from Kaelin stopped him. Silence rushed back in, broken only by heavy panting and the soft moan of the wind. Kaelin and Ronan shifted back, their human forms appearing amid torn fabric. They were breathing hard, blood streaking their skin from shallow cuts, but their focus was immediately on me. Kaelin crossed the clearing in quick strides. He stopped before me, his eyes scanning me for injury. "Are you hurt?" I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, my gaze still glued to the fallen wolf. He gently pried the gun from my locked fingers. I looked from Kaelin's gray face to Ronan's bloody, determined one, to Silas's calm vigilance as he secured the territory. The bonds I felt to them, those been new threads, didn't feel fragile anymore. They felt forged in fire. I wasn't just the guest they were protecting. I was Pack, and Pack fought together. "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Kaelin's lips quirked in that slight, approving smile again. "I didn't think you were." Dawn crept over Shadowfen like a thief, stealing the cover of darkness and exposing the night's violence. The body of the mercenary wolf was gone, taken away by the Pack for whatever secrets it might still yield. The clearing was scrubbed clean, but the memory of the attack hung in the air, a sharp, metallic scent over the usual pine and earth. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the wolf leaping, felt the kick of the gun, heard the final, sickening thud. Maeve had tried to get me to drink tea, to eat something. I'd managed a few sips before my stomach rebelled. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a hollow, shaky exhaustion and a mind that wouldn't stop racing. Kaelin, Ronan, and Silas were in the lodge's office with Marcus, the council representative, who had arrived just before sunrise. Their voices were a low, serious hum behind the closed door, planning, strategizing, dealing with the consequences of my existence. I felt like a storm cloud hovering over their home, bringing only lightning and ruin. Unable to sit still, I wandered out onto the back deck.
The forest was breathtaking in the morning light, mist clinging to the bases of the redwoods like ethereal skirts. It should have been peaceful. It felt like the calm before a greater storm. The office door opened. Marcus emerged first, his expression grim. He nodded to me once, a gesture of somber respect, and left without a word. The brothers filed out after him. Ronan had fresh bandages on his forearm. Silas looked as composed as ever, but there were shadows under his eyes. Kaylin's gaze found me immediately, and he came straight over. "We need to talk," he said, his voice carrying a new weight. We went to the large kitchen. Maeve was there, kneading dough with a fierce concentration that suggested she was punching out her own fears. She gave me a small, encouraging smile and left us alone. Kaylin leaned against the counter. Ronan took a chair, spinning it backward to straddle it, and Silas stood by the window, his back to us, watching the forest. The mercenary was carrying an encrypted comms device. Silas managed to crack the basic logs. The payments originated from a shell corporation, but it was traced back to a holding company owned by your mother's brother. "So it was definitely her," I said, the confirmation landing like a stone in my gut. "Undoubtedly," Ronan grunted, "but it's still circumstantial for a legal case. She's insulated. She'll claim her brother acted without her knowledge, a misguided attempt to save you from us. The more immediate problem is what they were saying on the comms. They weren't just hired to grab you. They were hired to confirm a status. Their last transmission, just before the attack, was one word: dormant. They were testing me," I whispered, understanding dawning, "to see if the wolfsbane was still working." Kayla nodded. "And now they know it's not. They felt your presence, even unawakened, when you faced that wolf. They felt the change. That information is already on its way back to your mother." A new kind of fear, cold and slick, coiled in my stomach. "What does that mean?" Ronan met my eyes, his gaze stark and honest. "It means she knows her insurance policy is about to cash itself in, and she'll do anything to get it back under control before it does. She'll come harder, faster, and she won't bother with hired guns next time. She'll use the law, the council, public pressure. She'll paint us as monsters who are exploiting a sick, confused Omega." The walls of the warm kitchen seemed to close in. There was no safe path. Run, and I was vulnerable. Stay, and I made them targets. Fight, and I had no weapons, no wolf, no power. "What is an anchor?" The question burst from me, the term that had been hovering unspoken since last night. The brothers exchanged a look, a silent debate. Kaylin was the one who answered, choosing his words with care. "Most Omegas provide balance to their pack, a calming presence, a nurturer. An anchor Omega is different. They're a focal point, a source of immense stability and strength for the entire pack, not just from calm, but from a profound intrinsic connection. They strengthen bonds, amplify pack sense, ground power. Historically, packs with a true anchor Omega were unconquerable. They're incredibly rare, once in several generations. And you think I'm one? The idea was ludicrous. I was a suppressed, overweight girl who just learned to hold a gun. Your bloodline hasn't produced an Omega in 3 generations, Elora, Silas said quietly. The potential has been there, dormant. Your mother didn't just suppress your wolf, Elora. She suppressed what your wolf was meant to be. She hid a nuclear reactor and told everyone it was a failing battery. The metaphor was terrifying. So if my wolf wakes up, fully?
"You won't just be an Omega," Ronan finished, his voice blunt. "You'll be a strategic asset, a prize, a game changer. Every pack on the continent will have an opinion on who claims you. And the pack that hid you," he added, his eyes darkening, "will be in very, very deep trouble with the Unified Council." The full scope of my mother's betrayal unfolded before me, vast and monstrous. It wasn't just about shame or disappointment. She'd discovered what I was, and instead of nurturing it, she'd seen a weapon, a bargaining chip. She'd kept me broken, ready to be used in whatever power play necessitated it. My entire life had been a premeditated act of sabotage. A wave of nausea, hot and fierce, rolled through me. It was different from fear. It was a physical revolt, a surge from deep within my core. I doubled over, a hand flying to my stomach. "Ilara," Kaylin was at my side in an instant. "I don't feel right," I gasped. A burning sensation spread from my center outwards, like my blood had been replaced with liquid fire. My bones ached, my skin felt too tight, prickling with a strange, crawling energy. Ronan was beside me in a flash, his hands hovering near my forehead. He didn't touch me, just inhaled deeply. "It's the last of the wolfsbane," he said, his voice tense. "Her system is purging it. Her wolf is fighting its way to the surface." The burning intensified, concentrating along my spine. A whimper escaped my lips. This wasn't like the gentle stirrings before. This was violent, an uprising. "It's too fast," I choked out. "I can't." "You can," Kaylin said firmly, his hands coming to rest on my shoulder. His touch was grounding, a point of stability in the swirling inferno. "Don't fight it. Your body knows what to do. Let it happen." "It hurts." "Because it's been imprisoned for 20 decades, Ronan said, his usual sharpness gone, replaced with something almost like awe. "That's not pain. That's power demanding to be free." I tried to breathe, to focus on Kaylin's hand, on the solid wood of the floor beneath my feet. But the fire became an inferno, my vision blurred, sounds distorting. The rustle of Maeve's dough became a landslide, the crackle of the fire a roaring blaze. I could smell everything: the yeast of the bread, the pine resin from the deck, the unique scent of each brother, the distant tang of the patrol wolves miles away. It was overwhelming, a sensory avalanche. And then a new sensation: threads. Delicate, shimmering threads of connection spooling out from my chest. One to Kaylin, steady and strong like an oak root. One to Ronan, vibrant and crackling like a live wire. One to Silas, deep and quiet like a subterranean river. And beyond them, fainter threads, dozens of them, reaching out into the lodge, into the forest, connecting me to every member of the Shadowfen pack. The anchor. This was what it felt like. With a cry that was part agony, part ecstasy, I fell to my knees. My body convulsed once, a final violent shudder, and then stillness. The fire receded, not gone, but banked. The overwhelming sensory flood eased into a crystal-clear, manageable stream. The ache in my bones faded, replaced by a thrilling, humming strength. I was still me, still in my human body, but everything was more. I was aware of my own heartbeat, the pulse of blood in my veins, the quiet power sleeping in my muscles. I looked up, panting. The 3 brothers were staring at me, frozen. Ronan's mouth was slightly agape. Silas had turned fully from the window, his eyes wide. Kaylin's hand was still on my shoulder, and I could feel the shock running through him. "What?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, clearer, richer. "Your eyes," Silas breathed. Kaylin helped me to my feet and guided me to a large polished metal surface of a hanging pot. Lid. My reflection stared back. I looked like myself. My hair was a mess, my face pale. But my eyes, they were no longer my simple, familiar brown. They swirled with hues of amber and gold, like molten honey held up to the light. And deep within them, a faint, ethereal silver light glimmered, the mark of a fully awakened, connected Omega. "The anchor eyes," Ronan said, the reverence in his tone unmistakable. "I've only ever seen them in old portraits." I touched my cheek, watching the stranger in the reflection do the same. This was real. The poison was gone. My wolf was awake, not as a separate entity to shift into, but as an integral, powerful part of me. I was whole. A sudden collective howl erupted from the forest, not of alarm, but of pure exultant joy. The entire Shadowfen pack had felt the shift, the solid click of a keystone falling into place. The threads I felt hummed with their celebration. Tears, hot and silent, spilled from my strange new eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, but of profound relief and the staggering sense of belonging. I had spent my life feeling like a ghost in my own skin. Now, for the first time, I was truly, completely present.
Kalen gently turned me from the reflection to face him. His gray eyes searched my new ones, and in them I saw no fear, no calculation of my value. I saw wonder and a fierce, protective pride. "Welcome home, Ilara," he said softly. The moment was shattered by the frantic beeping of a security monitor on the wall. Silas was there in an instant, his face hardening as he read the display. Kalen, perimeter sensors on the southern border, multiple vehicles, official markings. He looked up, his gaze meeting his brother's. "It's the Pacific Northwest Pac Council, and they're not alone. They have a contingent of Eastern Alliance enforcers." The joy of the moment evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. They'd come so fast. The news of the failed attack, the confirmation of my awakening, it had traveled at lightning speed. My mother wasn't waiting for the law. She was bringing it right to our door, backed by allies and armed force. Kalen's hand tightened on my shoulder. Ronan pushed to his feet, his body thrumming with renewed tension. The threads connecting me to them pulled taut, vibrating with shared resolve. The storm wasn't coming. It was here.
Kalen moved then, not aggressively, but with an authority that demanded attention. He pulled a tablet from inside his jacket. "We have evidence as well, Council Chair. Full toxicology reports showing 2 decades of systematic wolfsbane poisoning prescribed under Celeste Vance's orders. We have the confession of a hired mercenary, now deceased, linking the assassination attempt last night to Vance family funds. And we have the testimony of a fully awakened Anchor Omega." The word anchor landed among the council like a detonation. Alistair's eyes widened. The other officials began whispering urgently among themselves. The enforcers shifted stance, their hands moving subtly closer to their weapons. This changed everything. "An anchor?" Alistair breathed, his eyes locking on my swirling amber gaze. "Such a claim is extraordinary." "It is not a claim. It is a fact," Kalen stated. "One that Celeste Vance knew, one she suppressed. She didn't hide a defective daughter. She imprisoned a strategic asset. That is a crime against Pac law that supersedes any custody dispute." The air crackled with legal and primal tension. My mother's facade finally shattered. "Lies!" she hissed, her composure breaking into sharp-edged fury. "They have brainwashed her. They are exploiting a genetic anomaly for their own gain. You cannot let them keep her." "Who is exploiting whom, Celeste?" A new voice joined the fray. Marcus Webb stepped forward, facing his fellow council members. "I have seen the evidence Kalen speaks of. The poisoning is irrefutable. The Anchor awakening is visually confirmed. The law is clear. The suppression of an Anchor Omega is a capital offense. The custody of an awakened Anchor defaults to the Pac that provides her safety and stability, pending a full council review. Shadowfen has done that. Sterling, under Celeste's leadership, has done the opposite." It was a direct, brutal accusation. Celeste looked from Marcus to Alistair, to the other council members, and saw the ground shifting beneath her. The narrative of a grieving mother was evaporating, replaced by the uglier truth of a calculating criminal. "She is my daughter," Celeste cried, the raw emotion in her voice startlingly real. It was the plea of a woman losing control, not of a mother fighting for her child. "You would give her to these barbarians?" "No," I said. Everyone turned to me. The single word had echoed with a finality that silenced even my mother. I stepped forward, away from the protective line of the brothers, and stood between the two factions. I felt the threads connecting me to Shadowfen pull taut, a network of support. I looked at Alistair, meeting his assessing gaze. "No one is giving me to anyone," I said, my voice ringing with a confidence, not of arrogance, but of that deep, new inner certainty. "I am not a child. I am not an asset to be transferred. I am Ilara Vance, an adult Omega, and I am choosing where I belong." I turned my back on the council, on the enforcers, on my mother's furious, disbelieving face. I looked at Kalen, at Ronan, at Silas. I looked at Maeve, standing fierce in the doorway.
I looked at the gathered pack, their faces set in lines of solidarity. This pack saw me when I was invisible. They protected me when I was a target. They helped me find a strength I never knew I had. I turned back to Alistair. My choice is Shadowfen, not because they claimed me, but because I claim them as my pack, as my family. The silence that followed was absolute. In pack law, an Omega's formal, public choice held immense weight, especially in anchor Omegas. Alistair studied me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. The choice of a consenting adult Omega, particularly one of significant status, is a primary factor in council deliberations. He glanced at Celeste, whose face was bone white with rage. Given the severity of the counter-allegations, the custody petition is hereby suspended pending a full investigative tribunal. Miss Vance will remain with the Shadowfen pack under council observation until the tribunal convenes. It wasn't a complete victory. It was a stay of execution. But it was time. It was a chance. "No!" Celeste screamed, the sound raw and ugly. "You can't do this. She's mine. I made her. I owned her." The enforcers closest to her tensed. Her words, the naked truth of them, hung in the air, stripping away her last pretense. Alistair's expression turned to stone. "Enforcers, secure Mrs. Vance. She will be remanded to council custody for the duration of the investigation into charges of wolfsbane poisoning, conspiracy to commit murder, and suppression of a sovereign Omega nature." As two enforcers moved toward her, Celeste's eyes found mine. All pretense was gone. What looked back at me was pure, unadulterated hatred. "This isn't over," she spat, the words of venomous promise. "You think you've won? You've just made your first and last mistake. You have no idea what's coming for you, for all of you." They led her away, fighting and cursing, back to the sedan. The sight should have brought relief. Instead, her threat coiled around my heart like a cold serpent. The council officials began a hushed, intense discussion with Kaylin and Marcus. The enforcers formed a perimeter, their presence now a guard detail rather than a threat. The immediate battle was won. I stood there, shaking as the adrenaline ebbed. Ronan came to stand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. "You were impressive," he muttered, the compliment sounding grudgingly but sincere. "She meant what she said," I whispered, watching the car containing my mother disappear down the drive. "It never is with people like her," Silas said, joining us. "But now the fight is on equal footing. You have rights, you have status, you have a pack." Kaylin finished his conversation and walked over to us. The gravity on his face had eased slightly. "The tribunal is set for 3 weeks from now. We have time to prepare, to build an irrefutable case." He looked down at me. "And for you to learn what it means to be what you are." For the first time since the council arrived, I felt a flicker of something besides dread. Curiosity. The mystery of my own self was now the most important battlefield. That night, after the outsiders had left and a tense normalcy settled over the lodge, I found myself back in the clearing where I'd shot the wolf. The stars were a brilliant spray across the velvet sky, undimmed by the events below. I wasn't alone for long. Silas walked out of the tree line, as quiet as a shadow. He didn't speak, just came to stand beside me, looking up. "Can you feel them all the time?" I asked quietly, the question I'd been too overwhelmed to ask earlier. "The pack bonds?" He nodded. "Like a constant low hum, a map of heartbeats. You'll learn to filter it, to focus. It can be overwhelming at first." "It is," I admitted. "But it's also beautiful. I've never been connected to anything before." He was silent for a moment. "He tried to steal that from you, the most fundamental right of a wolf, connection. That's a deeper crime than any other."
His understanding was a balm. "What happens now with me, with this anchor thing?" "Now," he said, turning to face me, his eyes reflecting the starlight, "you learn to be the calm in the storm. You learn to be the center that holds. You learn that your strength isn't in dominance, but in unity. And we, he gestured back toward the lodge, learn how to be the territory that worthy of such a center. A howl lifted from the northern ridge, a long, clean note that spoke of vigilance and peace. This time, my wolf didn't just stir. It rose within me, not to shift, but to answer. A soft, harmonic hum resonated in my chest, a sound that was felt more than heard. It wasn't a howl to match theirs in volume, but in spirit. A thread of silver light, visible only to my new senses, pulsed from me and out toward the howl, strengthening the connection. Silas felt it. I saw the shock and then the profound satisfaction on his face. "There," he whispered. "That's it. That's the anchor's call." It was a beginning, not an end. My mother was in custody, but her threat lingered. The tribunal loomed. The world now knew what I was. But as I stood under the infinite stars, feeling the web of life that was Shadowfen humming around me, connected by 1,000 invisible threads of loyalty and newfound love, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer Alara Vance, the disposed of Omega. I was Alara of Shadowfen, the anchor, and I was finally ready to fight for what was mine. The 3 weeks before the tribunal passed in a whirlwind that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Shadowfen territory, once a place of fearful refuge, became my training ground, my sanctuary, and my classroom. The first lesson was control. My new senses were like a radio tuned to every station at once. I could hear a beetle scurrying under a log 50 yards away, smell the emotional state of a pack member approaching the lodge before I saw them, feel the subtle shift in the wind that spoke of a coming rain hours in advance. It was glorious and utterly debilitating. Silas became my guide in this. His own quiet, deep nature was perfectly suited to teaching focus. We would sit for hours in the silent heart of the forest, or in the still quiet of the lodge's library. "Don't try to silence the noise," he instructed, his voice a steady anchor in the sensory storm. "That's fighting yourself. Acknowledge it. Let it flow past you. Find the one thread you need and follow it." He taught me to find the thread of my own breathing, the steady beat of my heart. Then to gently extend a single thread of awareness to the old pine tree outside, feeling its slow, patient life. To Maeve in the kitchen, her contented focus as she baked. To the playful tussle of 2 young wolves near the creek, a knot of joyful energy. It was like learning to use a muscle I never knew I had. Exhausting, but with each successful focus, the overwhelming cacophony receded, becoming a manageable, beautiful symphony. Ronan's lessons were different, less about inner peace, more about practical survival. "An anchor's strength isn't in her claws," he said one morning, tossing me a practice knife with a blunted edge. "But that doesn't mean you get to be a damsel. If someone gets past us, you need to know how to make them regret it." His training was blunt, physical, and shockingly patient. He taught me to use my new awareness not just for peace, but for perception, reading an opponent's tension, predicting a movement a fraction of a second before it happened. He taught me to use my size not as a liability, but for leverage, for stability. He was a relentless drill sergeant, but his criticisms were aimed at my technique, never at me. "Again," he'd growl when I failed to disarm him for the 10th time, "you're thinking like a victim. Think like a wolf protecting her den." One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session, where I'd finally managed to sweep his legs out from under me, he'd let me, I was sure, but the triumph was real. I sat on the grass, panting. "Why are you doing this?" I asked him, wiping sweat from my brow. "You didn't ask for this, for me." He sat down opposite me, his usual sharpness softened by exertion. "The pack is everything," he said simply. "You are pack, therefore you are everything. We protect what's ours, and we make sure what's ours can protect itself." It was the closest to a declaration of belonging I'd ever heard from him. Kalen's lessons were the broadest, and perhaps the most daunting. He taught me about pack politics, about the history of Anchor Omegas,
about the intricate, often treacherous web of alliances and enmities that spanned the continent. "Your mother's arrest is a shockwave," he explained as we pored over maps and lineage charts in his office. "It has destabilized the Eastern Alliance. Other packs are scrambling, recalculating. Some see an opportunity, others see a threat. The fact that you've chosen Shadowfen, a traditionally isolated pack, makes us a focal point." "What do they want?" I asked, tracing the border of our territory on the map. "Some will want a challenge for you, to claim you through combat or alliance. Others will want to discredit you, to prove you're a fraud, to maintain the old balance. And some," he said, his gaze turning grave, "might simply want to ensure an anchor never reaches her full potential if they can't control her." The weight of it was immense. My existence was a political earthquake. How do we prepare for that? "We prove you're not a weapon to be won. We prove you're the heart of a strong, legitimate pack. We live. We thrive. We show them what an anchor truly means." And so I lived. I didn't just train. I joined Maeve in the kitchen, learning recipes, my anchor sense helping me intuit when a sauce needed just a touch more herb, when the bread had risen perfectly. I helped tend the garden, feeling a profound connection to the growing things, their simple, vital energy soothing my often frayed nerves. I sat with the pack elders in the evenings, listening to stories of Shadowfen's past. With each interaction, each shared moment, the threads connecting me to the pack grew stronger, brighter, more real. One evening, a week before the tribunal, something extraordinary happened. A young pack mother, Liana, brought her fussy, teething infant to the main lodge, desperate for a reprieve. The distressed cries of the baby were a physical pain in the air, grating on everyone's nerves. On instinct, I walked over and held out my arms. Liana, exhausted, handed the baby over with a grateful, worried look. I held the child close against my chest. Without thought, I reached for that inner stillness Silas had taught me, but instead of pulling it inward, I pushed it outward, along the thread of connection I felt to the tiny, miserable wolf child. It was a pulse of pure, calm reassurance, a wave of safe, loved, peaceful. The baby's cries hiccuped, then stopped. Her tense little body relaxed. She looked up at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, gurgled, and nestled her head against my shoulder, falling almost instantly into a deep, calm sleep. The entire great room fell silent. Every eye was on me. Liana's hand was over her mouth, her own eyes filled with tears of relief. Maeve beamed. Ronan looked stunned. Silas gave a slow, knowing nod. Kalen, who had been watching from the doorway, walked forward. He didn't speak. He just placed a hand gently on the sleeping baby's head, then his other on my shoulder. The connection between us flared, warm and solid. In that moment, it wasn't about politics or threats. It was about the fundamental nurturing power I held, the true meaning of an anchor. The moment was shattered by the urgent buzz of Kalen's satellite phone. He answered, his face hardening as he listened. He walked quickly into his office, closing the door. A cold foreboding trickled down my spine. The peaceful interlude was over. Ronan and Silas exchanged a look and followed him. I handed the sleeping baby back to her awed mother and moved toward the office. I didn't eavesdrop at the door this time. I was pack. I walked in. The three brothers were gathered around the desk, the phone on speaker. Marcus Webb's voice, strained and serious, filled the room. "Released on bail an hour ago. High-powered Eastern lawyers, political pressure. The poisoning charges are under review. The conspiracy charge is being attributed to her brother acting alone. She's walking free, Kalen." My blood turned to ice. Free? She's out there. "What are the conditions?" Kalen asked, his voice tight. "She's barred from leaving the state. She's barred from contacting Alara directly. But Kalen, she's already giving interviews to major pack news outlets. She's spinning a new story." "Let me guess," Ronan spat. "The poor, grieving mother, her daughter stolen and brainwashed by a fringe pack, her reputation smeared by ruthless alphas desperate to claim an anchor."
"Worse," Marcus said, the worry in his voice palpable. "She's not disputing the anchor status anymore. She's confirming it. She's saying she was protecting you, Alara, from exactly this,
from being exploited by power-hungry packs like Shadowfin. She's painting herself as a martyr and painting us as the villains who forced her hand, who drove her to extreme measures to protect her child. She's rallying sympathy, and she's calling for a neutral, caring pack to step forward and rescue you at the tribunal. The cleverness of it was diabolical. She had taken our truth and twisted it into a weapon. She was using my newfound status to galvanize opposition against Shadowfen. Public opinion is shifting, Marcus continued. Several major packs have already issued statements of concern. The tribunal won't just be a legal hearing anymore. It's becoming a public spectacle, a referendum on Shadowfin's right to keep you. Kalen ended the call and sank into his chair, running a hand over his face. The weight of leadership, of protecting what was his, was etched deeply into his features. "She's good," Silas said quietly, the admiration in his voice purely for her tactical skill, not her character. "We have to fight fire with fire," Ronan declared. "We get Alara in front of cameras. We have her tell her story." "And turn her into a pawn in a media war?" Kalen countered, looking at me. "Expose her to more scrutiny, more danger? No, we stick to the evidence, the facts." But the grim set of his jaw told me he knew facts might not be enough against a tidal wave of sympathetic narrative. I looked at the three of them. Kalen, the steadfast leader bearing the burden. Ronan, the fierce protector ready to charge into battle. Silas, the deep strategist seeing 3 moves ahead. The threads connecting us shone brightly in my inner sight, bonds forged in trust and shared struggle. The fear was still there, cold in my stomach, but beneath it, something else was rising. Not the fiery defiance of the border, nor the shaky courage of the attack. This was a calm, deep certainty. "She's made it personal," I said, my voice calm in the tense room. "She's made it about me and about you. So we make it personal too, but not with interviews or sound bites." They all looked at me. "We show them," I said, the idea taking shape as I spoke. "We don't just tell them I'm home. We show the entire Pack Council and anyone else watching exactly what an anchor means to Shadowfen. We don't defend ourselves against her story. We tell a better one, ours." Kalen's eyes narrowed in thought. "The tribunal will be held at the neutral grounds at Stone Creek. Packs from all sectors will send observers. It's a formal setting, but the gatherings before and after," Silas picked up, a spark in his eyes. "The social rituals, the pack displays, that's where perception is formed." Ronan grinned, a sharp, predatory expression. "A showing of strength, unity, not just with warriors, but with heart. Let them feel what she brings to us. Let them see it's not exploitation, it's symbiosis." It was a risk, putting ourselves on display. But hiding hadn't stopped my mother. Being cautious hadn't prevented the attack. It was time to stop reacting and start defining the battlefield ourselves. Kalen studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, we prepare for the tribunal not just as defendants, but as hosts. We show them the strength of our bonds." He stood up, the weight seeming to lift slightly, replaced by a focused energy. "Let's give them a story they'll never forget." The calm of the past few weeks was over. The storm of the tribunal was rushing towards us. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being swept away. I was standing in the ire of the hurricane with my pack around me, and I was learning how to calm the winds themselves. We weren't just going to face my mother's lies. We were going to shine a light so bright they would evaporate in its glare. Stone Creek was not a place. It was an idea carved in ancient stone and flowing water. The neutral grounds existed in a high mountain valley, accessible only by a single winding pass, a natural choke point that ensured no one pack could easily dominate. The air was thin and crisp, scented with juniper and cold stone. As our convoy, a larger, more formal procession of vehicles carrying the core of the Shadowfin pack, wound its way down into the valley, I saw the gathering for the first time. It looked like a historical encampment. Dozens of packs had already established their presence in designated areas, their banners fluttering in the alpine breeze. The soaring eagle of the Sky Peak Pack, the coiled serpent of the Canyonlands, the twin pine trees of the Evergreen Alliance. Tents, pavilions, and traditional lodges dotted the landscape around the central stone amphitheater where the tribunal would be held. It was breathtaking and utterly terrifying. Every flag represented power, history, and scrutiny, and they were all here, in part, because of me. I sat in the back of the lead SUV between Silas and Ronan. Kalen drove, his posture relaxed, but his senses clearly stretched to their limits, taking in the layout, the players, the subtle currents of power. "Remember," Silas said quietly, his gaze scanning the scene outside the window, "we are not petitioners, we are participants. We stand as a pack united. Your role is to be. Your presence will say more than any testimony." Ronan leaned forward, pointing toward a cluster of sleek, modern tents, flying a banner with a stylized, crowned wolf's head. "Eastern Alliance, Celeste's friends. They'll be watching every move." I followed his gaze and saw a small group of elegantly dressed wolves standing there. At their center, though I couldn't make out her features at this distance, was a familiar, straight-backed silhouette. Celeste. She had arrived before us, establishing her narrative on the ground. A chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air seeped into my bones. We pulled into the area marked for Shadowfen. It was a good spot, near a burbling creek and with a clear view of the amphitheater. As we disembarked, the pack moved with a seamless, practiced efficiency, setting up our large central pavilion, arranging cooking fires, posting perimeter guards. There was no fuss, no bluster, just quiet, confident competence. And everyone was watching. I could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes. The curiosity was a tangible pressure. Whispers slithered through the air, carried on the wind. "Is that her, the Shadowfen anchor? Look at her eyes. She seems so young. Celeste Vance looks furious." I kept my head up, my back straight, following Maeve's lead as she directed the unpacking of supplies. I used the mundane to anchor me in the surreal reality. The first test came sooner than expected. A delegation approached. 3 alphas, 2 men and a woman from a pack bearing a mountain goat insignia. They stopped at the edge of our area, waiting to be acknowledged. Kalen finished giving instructions to a pack member and turned to greet them, Ronan and Silas falling a step behind him. I stayed near Maeve, but within the circle of their presence. "Alpha Kalen," the lead man, graying and rugged, said with a respectful nod. "We are of the High Crag Pack. We come to pay our respects to the Shadowfen and to offer a greeting to the one who stands with you." His eyes, sharp and assessing, flicked to me. "You are welcome, Alpha Torvin," Kalen replied, his tone polite but reserved. "This is Alara." Torvin studied me, not with the leering calculation I'd feared, but with a deep, almost scientific curiosity. "The anchor eyes are true," he murmured, more to himself. He gave a slight, formal bow in my direction. "A rare blessing. Your presence brings a stability to the very air here. It is noticed." It wasn't flattery. It was an observation. My anchor sense, which had been humming with low-grade anxiety since arrival, confirmed it. The mere act of me standing calmly, even in the face of the assessment of other alphas, was already helping to settle the agitated energies of the gathering. Rooted in my pack was sending out subtle waves of calming influence, like a stone creating ripples in a pond. I was doing it without even trying. "We thank you for your greeting," Kalen said, a thread of pride in his voice. "The Vance woman," Torvin said, his voice dropping. "She has been busy, spreading stories like poison. Be watchful. Not all here see with clear eyes." With another nod, he and his delegation withdrew. It was a warning and an unexpected gesture of respect. We had made our first tentative connection. The rest of the day was a relentless parade of such encounters. Some packs sent representatives out of genuine curiosity or a desire to gauge the new power dynamic. Others, particularly those aligned with the Eastern Alliance, sent cold, formal observers who offered the bare minimum of diplomatic courtesy. A few, like a boisterous friendly pack from the southern coasts, came with offers of shared meals and loud laughter, their open curiosity a refreshing change. Through it all, I did as Silas instructed. I was. I greeted visitors with a quiet nod. I helped Maeve serve tea. I listened as Kaylin spoke pack politics. I felt the threads extending from our pavilion, thin and probing, as other anchors and sensitive alphas tested my presence. I didn't push back. I simply held my ground, my own anchor sense a steady, deep pull, letting their probes tell them what they would. That evening, as we sat around our central fire eating a simple, hearty stew, the real challenge arrived. Celeste came herself. She didn't bring a delegation. She came alone, dressed in a simple, elegant dress that looked both out of place and deliberately chosen to appear vulnerable. She stopped at the edge of the firelight, a tragic figure against the darkening mountains. The entire Shadowfen gathering went still. Ronan's spoon froze halfway to his mouth. Silas set down his cup without a sound. Kaylin slowly rose to his feet. "Alpha Shadowfen," Celeste said, her voice carrying perfectly, pitched to be heard by our pack and any within earshot. "I come under flag of truce. I wish only to speak to my daughter, alone, for a moment, a mother's plea." It was a masterstroke. In front of all these witnesses, refusing would make us look cruel, confirming her narrative of isolation and control. Allowing it gave her direct access to me. Every eye turned to me. The decision, I realized with a jolt, was being placed in my hands. I looked at Kaylin. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. "Your choice." I stood up, brushing off my pants. I felt the supportive pulse from the pack bonds, a surge of strength. I walked forward, stopping a few feet from her, well within the circle of firelight, where everyone could see. "You have your moments, Celeste," I said, deliberately using her name. "Speak." Her eyes, so like mine in shape, but so dead in spirit, glistened with manufactured tears. "Ilara, darling, look at you, among these strangers. Can you not see what they're doing? Using you as a symbol, a trophy. Come away from this fire. Come speak to me, just us. Let me explain everything. You don't have to go through with this tribunal. We can go home." Her voice was a silken trap, layered with false warmth and maternal concern. It was the voice that had dictated my life, prescribed my poison, and arranged my disposal. Hearing it here, wrapped in a new lie, ignited not fear, but a clean, cold fury. "You have no home to offer me," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the hushed evening. "The home you built for me was a cage of poison and lies. The only explanation I need from you is why you thought I deserved that, and you can give that explanation to the tribunal." A ripple went through the surrounding packs. My words were not those of a brainwashed victim. They were the words of a woman who knew her own mind. Celeste's mask cracked. The tears evaporated, replaced by a flash of pure venom. "You foolish girl," she hissed, low enough for only I and the nearest Shadowfen ears to hear. "You think these brutes care for you? You're a tool to them, a key to power. When they're done using you, they'll discard you just as I did, but I, at least, kept you alive." "You kept me dormant," I fired back, my own voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "They woke me up. That's the difference between a prison and a home. Now, your moment is over." I turned my back on her, a deliberate, powerful gesture of dismissal, and walked back to the fire. I sat down, picking up my abandoned bowl. My hands were shaking, but inside, I felt a rock-solid certainty. Kaylin didn't sit. He addressed Celeste, his voice formal and cold. "Your truce is acknowledged, and your moment is concluded. You are not welcome at our fire. Good night, Mrs. Vance." Celeste stood frozen for a second, humiliation and rage warring on her face. She had played her public card and lost. She turned and disappeared into the darkness, back towards the glittering lights of the Eastern Alliance camp. The silence around our fire held for a beat, then erupted into a low buzz of conversation, not from us, but from the packs camped nearby who had witnessed the exchange. The story would spread before dawn. The Shadowfen anchor was not manipulated child. She was a woman with a spine who had publicly renounced her mother. Ronan leaned over, his voice a low grumble. That was exceptionally satisfying. Silas simply handed me a fresh cup of tea, his eyes smiling. Kalen sat back down beside me. "You handled that perfectly," he said quietly. "You defined the relationship on your terms. That will echo louder than any of her prepared speeches." As the night deepened and the stars blazed overhead with unnatural clarity in the thin air, I felt a shift in the valley. The curious, probing attention from other packs had changed. The pity or suspicion was fading, replaced by a dawning respect, a wary acknowledgement. We had come to Stone Creek as a pack under scrutiny. In one evening, we had begun to shift the narrative. We were not just defending ourselves, we were presenting a united front, with an anchor who was calm, clear, and unbreakable. The tribunal tomorrow would be a legal battle, but the true war, the war for perception, for legitimacy, was being fought here under the open sky, and we had just won the first skirmish. As I lay in my tent later, listening to the distant murmur of the creek and the quiet, vigilant breathing of my pack all around me, I felt no fear for the morning. The threads connecting me to them were strong, a luminous web in the darkness. My mother had her lies and her lawyers. We had the truth, and we had each other. And for the first time in my life, I knew with absolute certainty which was stronger. Dawn at Stone Creek was a solemn affair. The mist clung to the pines like ghostly banners, and the air held a hushed, anticipatory silence, as if the very mountains were holding their breath. Today, the stone amphitheater would not host songs or stories. It would host a tribunal that could reshape pack alliances across the continent. I dressed with care, in simple, sturdy clothes, dark pants, a soft green tunic that reminded me of Shadowfen's forests. Maid braided my hair into a thick, practical crown. I wore no jewelry except the small silver pendant Marcus had given me, the mark of a recognized Omega. I wanted to look like what I was, a member of a pack, not a prize on display. The amphitheater filled slowly. Delegates from over 20 different packs took their places on the concentric stone benches, arranged not by rank, but by a complex, ancient system of rotation. The Eastern Alliance contingent, with Celeste at her center, sat across the circle from our Shadowfen group. The space between us felt charged, a no-man's land of legal and emotional conflict. At the center of the arena stood a simple stone dais. Upon it sat 7 elder alphas and omegas from neutral packs, their faces lined with experience and their eyes missing nothing. Alistair Vance presided. A horn sounded, deep and resonant, echoing off the stone. The murmuring crowd fell silent.
"This tribunal is now in session," Alistair announced, his voice carrying effortlessly. "We are gathered to adjudicate the matter of guardianship and status regarding Alara Vance and the attendant allegations between the Sterling Pack, led by Celeste Vance, and the Shadowfen Pack, led by Kalen Shadowfen. Let the proceedings begin with the presentation of evidence from the petitioner, Celeste Vance." Celeste rose, a picture of grieving dignity. Her lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an immaculate suit, stood beside her. They presented their case with clinical efficiency. Affidavits from Sterling Pack doctors describing my history of psychological frailty and metabolic imbalance. Financial records showing the substantial resources devoted to my care. Testimonials from pack members speaking of my mother's devoted, if strained, efforts with a challenging child. Then the new narrative. A child psychologist, hired by Celeste's legal team, took the stand. He spoke of coercive control patterns, of isolation tactics used by predatory packs to secure valuable members,
of the trauma of sudden separation that could explain my erratic behavioral shift and claimed awakening. He never called me a liar. He painted me as a victim, first of my own biology, now of Shadowfin's manipulation. It was clever, insidious, and it clearly resonated with some of the neutral observers, whose faces showed sympathy. Through it all, I sat between Kaylin and Silas, my hands folded in my lap, my anchor sense calm. I let the lies wash over me, feeling them for what they were, flimsy constructs. Ronan, on Silas's other side, vibrated with barely contained fury, but he held his silence. When Celeste's lawyer finished, he turned a pitying gaze toward me. We seek only the safe return of a vulnerable daughter to the family who was loved and protected her, however imperfectly, and to place her in a neutral, therapeutic environment where her true needs can be assessed free from external influence. He sat down. Celeste dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Alistair turned to our side. Alpha, Kaylin Shadowfin, you may present your evidence. Kaylin stood. He didn't approach the dais with a lawyer. He simply walked to the center of the arena, a lone figure of quiet authority. He began not with documents, but with a story. 24 days ago, he said, his voice ringing clear, a young woman was left in the rain at a border. She had one bag. She had been told she was restitution for a debt. She believed she was being sent to punishment. He looked at me, then back at the council. What we found was not a defective omega. We found a poisoned one. He laid out the evidence with stark simplicity. The lab reports analyzing the wolfsbane residue in my system, charting the dosage consistent with childhood administration. The shattered pill bottle itself entered as an exhibit. Then he played the audio, the crackling, mercenary voice from the comms device, confirming the contract and the payment source. The damning word, dormant. The atmosphere in the amphitheater shifted. The sympathy for Celeste began to curdle into unease. But evidence of a crime is not the full story, Kaylin continued. The accused claims she was protecting her daughter. From what? He paused, letting the question hang. From this. He turned and gestured to me. Ilara, please join me. My heart leapt into my throat, but I stood. Silas gave my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze. I walked to the center, standing beside Kaylin, facing the council and the sea of watching eyes. Council members, Kaylin said, you have heard claims of manipulation, of a created narrative. Look at her, speak to her, then decide. Alistair leaned forward, his keen eyes on me. Ilara Vance, you have heard the allegations that you are unwell, that you are coerced. What is your truth? I took a deep breath, pulling on the deep well of calm at my core. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the council, and I spoke not as a victim, but as a witness to my own life. My truth is that for as long as I can remember, I felt like a ghost. I was told my body was wrong, my silence was wrong, my very existence was a burden. The pills were a part of my breakfast, like milk. They made the world dull and far away. They made the wolf inside me, the part that should have been my heart, fall into a deep sleep. I spoke of the loneliness, the constant criticism, the final cold abandonment at the border. I believed her. I believed I was worthless, that I deserved to be thrown away. Then I turned my gaze to Kaylin, to Ronan and Silas in the benches, to Maeve and the other Shadowfin members. They showed me a different truth. They gave me food without shame, a room where the floor wouldn't creak under my weight. They saw the poison for what it was and helped me clear it from my body. They didn't ask for anything. They just made space for me to exist. I turned back to the council. The woman who poisoned me calls it protection. The pack that healed me is accused of coercion. You must decide which act looks like care and which looks like control. My mind is never been clearer. My choice has never been more my own. I am Elara of Shadowfen. That is my truth. As I finished, I did something instinctual. I let my guard down just a little. I let the anchor's presence within me swell, not as a display of power, but as an emission of my essential nature, calm, connective, deeply rooted. It wasn't a wave that crashed over the amphitheater, but a gentle, pervasive shift in the atmosphere, like the settling of a foundation. The agitated, partisan energy in the space softened. Breaths deepened. Even the council members seemed to sit back, their expressions thoughtful, less sharp. The demonstration was wordless, but it was the most powerful testimony I could give. Alistair studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you, Elara. You may return to your seat." The proceedings moved to cross-examination and final arguments. Celeste's lawyer tried to poke holes in the evidence, to suggest the mercenary was a rogue actor, to imply the awakening itself was a stressful psychotic break. But the foundation of their case, the concerned mother, was crumbling. Finally, Alistair called for a recess so the tribunal could deliberate. The hour that followed was an eternity. We returned to our pavilion, but no one could eat or rest. The entire pack hovered in a state of suspended animation. Ronan paced like a caged tiger. Silas sat perfectly still, his eyes closed, listening to things only he could hear. Kaelin stood at the entrance, watching the council tent. I sat by the creek, trailing my fingers in the icy water, feeling its constant, unwavering flow. My anchor sense was wide open, feeling the anxiety of my pack, the buzzing speculation from the rest of the valley, and the dark, seething knot of fury that was my mother's camp. The horn sounded again, summoning us back. We filed into the amphitheater under a sky that had turned a hard, brilliant blue. The council members took their seats, their faces unreadable. Alistair stood. The silence was absolute. "This tribunal has heard the evidence and the testimony. The allegations are grave on both sides. However, the core issue before us is one of welfare and rightful belonging." He looked directly at Celeste. "Celeste Vance, the evidence of deliberate long-term wolfsbane suppression is credible and substantiated. Your claim of medical necessity is not supported by any independent pack physician. This council finds that your actions constituted a severe and intentional suppression of your daughter's wolf nature, a crime under unified pack law." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Celeste went pale, her hands gripping the bench in front of her.
Alistair continued. "Regarding the petition for guardianship, given the above finding and given the clear, unequivocal choice expressed by Elara Vance herself, a choice made as an awakened adult Omega, this tribunal denies the petition in its entirety. Legal guardianship is rendered moot. Elara Vance is recognized as a sovereign adult under pack law." I felt a dizzying rush of relief, but Alistair wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he said, his voice gaining weight, "based on the testimony and observed evidence, this tribunal officially recognizes Elara Vance as a true anchor Omega. Her status is hereby entered into the Continental Register." He then turned to Kaelin. "Alpha Shadowfen. The Shadowfen pack is confirmed as Elara Vance's pack of choice and residence. However, the allegations of coercive acquisition, while less credible in light of her testimony, arose from a transfer conducted outside council oversight. Therefore, a probationary period of 1 year is instituted. During this time, the Shadowfen pack's guardianship will be subject to quarterly review by a neutral council observer. This is not a punishment, but a safeguard to ensure the anchor's integration and welfare are as secure as they appear." It was a compromise, a victory, but with conditions. Kaelin gave a solemn nod of acceptance. Alistair's gaze swept the assembly. "The matter of criminal charges against Celeste Vance for suppression and conspiracy is remanded to a separate judicial panel.
She will remain in the custody of the Pacific Northwest Council until that time. It was over. We had won. Not a crushing total victory, but a real, legal, binding affirmation of my choice and my safety. As the council rose and the amphitheater erupted in conversation, my eyes met my mother's across the distance. There was no grief there now, no false tears, only a look of pure, unadulterated hatred and a promise of endless war. Then enforcers moved in, escorting her away. I didn't feel triumph as I watched her go. I felt a solemn finality. The bond was severed, legally and irrevocably. Kaylin, Ronan, and Silas surrounded me, not with cheers, but with a solid, warm presence. Maeve hugged me fiercely, tears in her eyes. "You did it, child. You're free." As we walked back to our camp through the dispersing crowd, I felt the looks from other packs change once more. No longer curiosity or pity, but a new measuring respect. The Shadowfen anchor was not a rumor or a pawn, she was a fact, and her pack had just been validated in front of the entire gathered world. The probationary period was a cloud on the horizon. My mother's hatred was a stain on the past, but in the clear, high-altitude sunlight of Stone Creek, with the threads of my pack strong and vibrant around me, I felt something I had spent a lifetime without. I felt, for the first time, truly and completely free. Victory, it turned out, was not a destination, but a new kind of battlefield. The return to Shadowfen was triumphant, but the quiet that settled over the territory in the following days was not the peace we'd hoped for. It was the tense, watchful quiet of a kingdom that has won a war, but knows the scouts of other kingdoms are now at its borders. The tribunal's verdict was a public record. The registration of an Anchor Omega sent ripples through the pack networks. Congratulations arrived, formal and curious from some quarters. Cold, assessing silence came from others, particularly those aligned with the now disgraced Eastern Alliance. And then there were the others, the ones who saw not a person, but an opportunity. The probationary period was the crack in our armor, and the world was full of wolves who knew how to exploit a crack. The council observer arrived a week after our return. His name was Eris Thorne, an older beta from a neutral mountain pack. He was polite, professional, and his eyes missed nothing. He didn't move into the lodge. He set up a small cabin on the edge of the territory, a silent reminder of the oversight. His quarterly reports would determine if the council's safeguard became a permanent leash or if Shadowfen's guardianship would be made absolute. My life became a structured duality. In the mornings, I continued my training with Silas and Ronan, now focusing on refining control and learning anchor-specific skills. How to consciously strengthen pack bonds during a crisis, how to project calm over a wider area, how to sense disturbances in the pack's collective spirit. It was exhausting, heady work. In the afternoons, I was often with Eris. He interviewed me, walked with me through the territory, observed my interactions with the pack. He asked pointed questions about my freedom, my choices, my happiness. I answered honestly, but it felt like a constant examination. "He's looking for a script," Ronan grumbled one evening after Eris had questioned the intensity of my defensive training. "He wants to see the perfectly adjusted, serene Omega in a supportive environment. He doesn't understand that strength is part of your adjustment." "He understands just fine," Kaylin countered, his brow furrowed as he studied a map. "He's looking for any sign of coercion, of us molding you into a weapon. We have to be flawless." The pressure was immense. I had to be the perfect anchor, nurturing, calm, unifying, while also proving I was a free individual, not a puppet. Any misstep, any conflict could be twisted into a report of instability or control. The first real test came from the outside. A delegation from the Ironwood pack arrived, unannounced. They were a powerful, expansionist pack from the Northern Plains, known for their wealth and their alpha, Magnus Ironwood, a man whose ambition was legendary. They were welcomed with formal courtesy, but the air in the lodge grew thick. Magnus was a large man with a booming laugh that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. He brought gifts, fine furs, rare spices, and lavish praise for Shadowfen's remarkable fortune in hosting an anchor. The dinner was a tense affair. Magnus held court, speaking of alliances, of shared prosperity, of the new era my presence heralded. Then, over dessert, he leaned forward, his gaze settling on me like a physical weight. "Such a rare treasure should not be confined to one territory," he said, his tone jovial but his eyes sharp. "An anchor's gifts benefit all wolfkind. Perhaps when this probationary period concludes, the Ironwood Pack could host you for a season, a cultural exchange, to spread the stability you bring." It was a polite, public opening move, a claim in waiting. He wasn't challenging Kalen's authority directly, he was sowing the idea that I was a communal resource. Before Kalen could formulate a diplomatic reply, I spoke. I set down my fork, the soft click sounding loud in the sudden quiet. "The stability I bring is rooted in the soil of Shadowfen, Alpha Ironwood. An anchor's strength is in her deep, true connections. Uprooting her would weaken the gift, not share it. I am home." Magnus's smile tightened. "Of course, my dear. I only meant to offer new experiences. You are, after all, still so young to the world." "I have experienced enough of the world to know where I belong," I replied, holding his gaze. The anchor within me swelled, not in aggression, but in a quiet, immovable assertion of place. The air in the room seemed to solidify slightly, the Shadowfen members sitting a little straighter, their bonds to me humming with solidarity. Magnus felt it. The calculated charm in his eyes flickered, replaced with the flash of frustrated understanding. He had tried to pluck a flower and found its roots were intertwined with an entire forest. He left the next morning, his farewells polite but chilly. The attempted poaching had been deflected, but it was a warning shot. We were on the map, and others would come. The external pressure was matched by an internal shift. As my anchor abilities grew, my role within the pack evolved. It was no longer just about learning, it was about leading in my own way. One afternoon, a dispute erupted between two pack members over territory for a new cabin. Voices were raised, old grievances surfaced. Before Kalen or the pack elders could intervene, I felt the discord like a snarl in the smooth web of pack bonds. It was a jagged, painful tear in the unity.
Without thinking it, I walked out to where they stood arguing. I didn't shout. I simply stood between them, placed a hand on each of their chests, and closed my eyes. I reached for the core of calm within me and pushed it outward, not as a command for silence, but as a reminder of connection. I followed the angry threads of their dispute back to the older, stronger threads that bound them as brothers in arms, as neighbors who had shared 100 meals. The anger didn't vanish, but its sharp edges softened. Their shouts died down. They blinked, looking at each other, then at my hands, then at my face. The reminder of what they were to each other, of what they were to the pack, was more powerful in that moment than any alpha's command. "The eastern slope gets more sun," one muttered, his voice now just grumpy. "You can have the bigger timber plot." The other nodded, shamefaced. "Yeah, fine." The conflict dissolved. I hadn't decided for them. I had reminded them of themselves. It was the true essence of the anchor. Not rule, but reconciliation. From the porch of his distant cabin, Eris Thorne watched the entire interaction, his notebook in hand. He said nothing, but later that day he remarked to Kalen, "Her integration is organic, not imposed. That is notable." It was a small point in our favor, but in the meticulous accounting of the probation, every point mattered. The greatest challenge, however, came from a place I didn't expect, myself. The constant scrutiny, the political maneuvering, the weight of expectation, it began to wear on the newfound confidence I'd built. In quiet moments, the old whispers returned.
Who are you to do this? You're just the fat girl they felt sorry for. You're playing at being important. Late one night, overwhelmed, I slipped out to the training clearing. I wasn't there to practice. I just needed to scream into the silent trees, to let the frustration out where no one would see. I didn't realize Silas was there until I sank to the ground, my head in my hands. He emerged from the shadows and sat beside me, not speaking, just offering his presence. I don't know if I can do this, I confessed into the darkness, my voice thick. Everyone is watching, waiting for me to fail, to prove my mother right, or to prove I'm not worth all this trouble. The only person you need to prove anything to is yourself, Silas said after a long pause. And you already have. You stood before the council, you faced down Magnus Ironwood, you healed a rift in the pack today. That is not a failing person, Ilara. That is a leader discovering her stride. It feels like I'm pretending. All leaders feel that way at first. The difference is, you have a pack that isn't following a title. They're following you, the you that chose them, the you that stands with them. That's not pretense. That's the most real thing there is. His words were a balm. He didn't offer empty praise. He offered perspective. The threads connecting me to him, always so deep and quiet, pulsed with a steady, unwavering faith. I looked up at the stars, the same stars that had watched over my disposal and my awakening. The doubt didn't vanish, but it shrank, put in its place by the tangible evidence of my own actions and the unwavering support of my pack. The probation was a weight. The crown of being an anchor was heavy, but I was not carrying it alone. I was surrounded by those who helped me bear it, who fought to protect my right to wear it, and who believed in the strength it represented. The road ahead was long. Eris's reports, rival packs, my mother's lingering shadow. The battles were far from over. But as I stood up, Silas rising beside me and looked back toward the warm lights of the lodge, I knew one thing. I was not the girl who had been left in the rain anymore. I was the anchor who had chosen her ground, and I would hold it. The deep winter came to Shadowfen, draping the redwoods in cloaks of white and silencing the forest under a thick blanket of snow. It was a time of inward focus, of huddling around hearths, of stories and shared warmth. But the peace of the season was a lie. The first sign was subtle. A section of fence around the northern grazing pastures was found chewed through, not by the teeth of deer or curious bears, but by wire cutters. The tools were left behind, crude and untraceable. A message: we were here. The second sign was more sinister. The main water line feeding the lodge and the cluster of cabins around it froze and burst. Not unusual for winter, except the insulation had been meticulously stripped away in a hidden section, and the shutoff valve was jammed open with a rock. It took a day of frantic work in sub-zero temperatures to repair it. Sabotage. Not an attack, but a slow, gnawing erosion, a test of resilience, designed to fray nerves, drain resources, and create the appearance of instability, exactly what Eris Thorne was watching for. Kaelin held a pack meeting in the great room, the fire roaring against the chill of the breached trust. Faces were grim, tired from the repair work. "This is coordinated," Ronan stated, pointing to a rough map on the table. The fence, the water line, they're probing, looking for weak spots, trying to make us look incompetent or to push us into making a mistake. "Who?" a young pack warrior asked, his hands curled into fists. "Does it matter?" Silas murmured, his eyes distant, listening. Rivals who want the probation to fail, allies of Celeste seeking revenge, packs like Ironwood wanting to create an unsafe environment to justify a challenge. The list is long. "The goal is the same," Kaelin concluded, his voice low and hard. "To undermine us before Eris's next report, to make it seem like we cannot provide a stable, secure home for our anchor." His eyes found me across the room, filled with a protective fury. "We will double the patrols, secure all critical infrastructure. No one goes alone." The pack moved with grim determination, but a new tension settled in, the kind that came from an unseen enemy. It was a war of attrition fought in the cold and dark. My role in this silent war was paradoxical. I was the target, yet also a key part of the defense. My anchor senses, now finely tuned, became an early warning system. I walked the territory with Silas or Ronan, not just with my eyes, but with that deep, connective awareness. I could feel the health of the land, the normal, sleepy pulse of the pack in winter, and I began to feel the disturbances, cold spots of malicious intent that had passed through, lingering like a bad smell. It was during one of these walks with Ronan, a week after the waterline incident, that we found the third act of sabotage. In a remote storage shed containing emergency medical supplies and dry food reserves, every item had been contaminated, not destroyed, but rendered useless. Salt mixed into sugar, dirt into the bandages, water poured over the dried meats. It was petty, vile, and dangerously effective. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It was a petty, vile, and dangerously effective. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness, our ability to care for our sick and injured. It targeted our preparedness.
In the clearing, Ronan's wolf, locked in a grapple with the leader, seemed to blaze with sudden, renewed power. A roar tore from his throat that was more than sound. It was the embodied fury of the entire Shadowfen pack. He threw off the leader, whirled, and his flanking attackers hesitated for a critical second, overwhelmed by the sudden psychic barrage of pack wrath. That second was all Kalen and the others needed. They exploded into the clearing from the trees, a wave of Shadowfen wolves. The fight was over in moments. The three saboteurs were subdued, shifted back to human form, and pinned in the snow. I reached the edge of the clearing as Kalen, back in human form, was interrogating the leader. The man was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his defiance crumbling under the cold fury of the Shadowfen Alpha. "Who paid you?" Kalen demanded.
The man spat blood into the snow. "No one you can touch. They said you were getting too comfortable, that the anchor was making you look strong. We were just reminding you of your place." "Which pack?" Ronan growled, a hand on the man's shoulder, fingers digging in. Before he could answer, a new presence arrived at a walk. Eris Thorne, the council observer drawn by the commotion. He took in the scene, the captured men, the furious Shadowfen wolves, and me, standing at the tree line, my strange eyes doubtless glowing in the dim winter light. "Explain," Eris said, his voice neutral. Kalen did, succinctly. The sabotage, the tracking, the interception. He presented the captured men and their tools as evidence. Eris listened, then turned his gaze to me. "You tracked them? How?" "I felt their intent," I said, meeting his eyes. "They left a stain on the pack bonds. I followed it." "And you?" He looked at Ronan. "You engaged against 3, against orders to hold." "They were fleeing," Ronan said, unrepentant. "They would have gotten away to strike again." Eris was silent for a long moment, looking from the saboteurs to us. Then he did something unexpected. He nodded once. "A pack protects its own, and an anchor is the heart of the pack. Their defense is not just permitted, it is necessary." He looked at Kalen. "I will include this incident in my report, the attempted destabilization and your pack's effective, unified response to protect their member. It will be noted as a point of stability, not instability." It was a monumental shift. The sabotage, meant to break us, had instead given us a chance to demonstrate our strength and unity in the most concrete way possible. The saboteurs were handed over to Eris to be remanded to council justice. As we trudged back to the lodge in the fading afternoon light, the mood was no longer grim, but grimly satisfied. We had been tested, and we had not just endured, we had triumphed. That night, as we gathered around the great fire, the atmosphere was different. The tension had burned away, replaced by a solid, warm cohesion. The pack had fought together, and I had played my part not as a burden, but as a crucial asset. Ronan sat beside me, his arm in a sling from a deep bite. "That pulse you sent," he said quietly, from my ears only, "that was something else. Felt like the whole pack had my back." "They did," I said simply. "I just helped you feel it." He gave me a look, one of his rare, true smiles touching his lips. "Don't sell yourself short, Anchor." Kalen raised a mug of spiced cider. "To the pack," he said, his eyes sweeping the room, lingering on me. "And to the heart that keeps its beats steady, no matter the storm." The toast was echoed by everyone, their faces turned towards me not with pity or curiosity, but with respect, with belonging. The winter silence outside was no longer threatening. It was the sound of a territory at peace, guarded by a pack that had proven its mettle. The sabotage had failed. Instead of breaking us, it had forged us tighter. And I, the once disposed of Omega, had not been a passive prize in the conflict. I had been the compass, the amplifier, the unwavering center. The probation wasn't over, but as I sat surrounded by my family, feeling the strong, vibrant web of bonds that connected us all, I knew with a certainty that settled deep into my bones. No report, no saboteur, no rival alpha could sever these ties. This was my place. This was my power. And I would never let anyone threaten it again.
Inside, the 7 members of the Tribunal Council sat at a simple wooden table. Alistair Vance presided. Eris Thorne sat off to the side, his expression unreadable. The atmosphere was formal, but not hostile. "Alpha Shadowfen, Anchor Ilara," Alistair began, his voice echoing softly in the quiet room. "Thank you for coming. We have reviewed Observer Thorne's comprehensive report on the probationary period, as well as all subsequent documentation, including the incident of attempted sabotage and your pack's response." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle.
My heart was a steady drum in my chest. I focused on the threads connecting me to Kaelin, to Silas and Ronan behind me, drawing strength from their solid presence. The purpose of the probation was to ascertain whether the Shadowfen pack could provide a stable, secure, and nurturing environment for an Anchor Omega, free from coercion or exploitation. Observer Thorne's report is detailed. It notes the external pressures you faced, including the unsolicited advances of the Ironwood pack and the coordinated sabotage by unknown parties. He picked up a sheet of paper. The report also details the internal dynamics, the organic integration of Anchor Ilara into pack life, her role in conflict resolution, her development of her abilities, and their use for the pack's welfare and defense. It notes her unequivocal statements of choice and belonging, made both in public and private interview. Alistair set the paper down and looked directly at me, then at Kaelin. The Council finds that the Shadowfen pack has not only met the conditions of the probation, but has exceeded them. You have demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity, unity in the face of division, and have fostered an environment where the Anchor's unique gifts are not just protected, but are allowed to flourish for the benefit of the entire pack. A wave of relief so potent it made my knees weak washed through me. I felt Kaelin beside me release a slow, controlled breath. Therefore, Alistair announced, a note of finality in his voice, the probationary period is hereby concluded. The guardianship of the Shadowfen pack over Anchor Omega Ilara is made absolute and permanent, recognized and sanctioned by the Unified Pack Council. Her status and her choice are irrevocable. He smiled then, a small, genuine curve of his lips. Congratulations, you have proven the strength of your bonds. Formal documents were signed, handshakes were exchanged. The council members offered their personal congratulations, their earlier neutrality warming into respect. Eris Thorne came forward last. Your pack is remarkable, he said to Kaelin. And you, Anchor Ilara, you carry your power with grace and purpose. The reports did not do you justice. I wish you and Shadowfen every strength. As we walked out of the lodge into the bright spring sunlight, the feeling was surreal. It was over, truly over. The legal loose ends were tied. My place was cemented in law and in tradition. We should celebrate, Ronan said, clapping a heavy hand on Kaelin's shoulder, a broad grin on his face. A proper feast, one without anyone trying to steal our anchor or poison our supplies. We will, Kaelin said, his own smile bright and rare, at home. But the day held one more surprise. As we made our way back to our vehicles, a figure stepped out from behind a stand of aspen trees. It was Torvin, the alpha of the High Crag pack, who'd first greeted us with wary respect. Alpha Shadowfen, Anchor Ilara, he said, his rugged face serious. A moment, if you will. We stopped. Torvin glanced at Silas and Ronan, then back at us. The council's decision will be public by nightfall. Many will accept it, some will not. My pack has watched. We saw how you handled the Ironwood fool. We saw how you stood against the saboteurs. We see the strength of your union. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. High Crag is not a large pack, but we are old and we are proud. We value stability and true strength over bluster and greed. He looked directly at me. Your presence brings a balance to this region that has been missing. Shadowfen, with its anchor rooted deep, will become a pillar. He turned his gaze to Kaelin. We would not see that pillar stand alone. High Crag offers a formal alliance, not submission, but partnership, mutual defense, shared counsel, a recognition that our fortunes in this new era are intertwined. It was an unprecedented offer. Alliances were common, but one prompted not by conquest or marriage, but by the perceived strength and stability I brought. It was a testament to how far we'd come. Kaelin, ever the diplomat, but with a new light in his eyes, extended his hand. Shadowfen accepts Alpha Torvin. We would be honored to call High Crag ally and friend. The alliance was sealed with a handshake there in the mountain sunshine, witnessed only by the whispering trees. It was the first fruit of our hard-won peace, a sign that the respect we'd fought for was translating into real security. The journey home was a celebration. The relief, the triumph, the new hope, it filled the vehicle with a buoyant energy even Silas couldn't contain, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips the whole way. That night, back in the Shadowfen Lodge, the feasting was everything Ronan had wanted. The great table groaned with food and drink. The fire roared. Stories were told not of conflict or fear, but of the future, of spring planting, of new construction, of the young wolves' upcoming first shifts. I sat at the table not as a guest of honor, but as a member of the family, laughing at jokes, passing plates, my heart so full it ached. Later, when the feasting had died down to contented murmurs and the stars were brilliant through the high windows, I slipped outside onto the deck. The air was cool and sweet with the scent of awakening earth. I wasn't alone long. Kaelin joined me, leaning on the railing beside me. "It's real now," I said softly, looking out at the forests that was my home. "It was always real," he replied. "The council's paper finally caught up to the truth we've been living." He was quiet for a moment. "You've changed this pack, Ilara. You've changed us. You've given us a center we didn't know we were missing. I didn't do it alone." "No," he agreed, "but you were the catalyst, the missing piece." He turned to face me, his gray eyes serious through a starlight. "The alliance with High Crag is just the beginning. Others will follow. Your influence, our united strength, will shape this territory for generations. Are you ready for that?" I looked from his earnest face back to the sleeping forest, to the lodge full of my pack behind me. I felt the deep humming network of bonds, to the land, to every soul within it. It was a vast responsibility, but it was not a weight. It was a foundation. "I am," I said, and for the first time there was not a shred of doubt in the words. "This is my place, this is my pack, and I am ready to help lead it into whatever future comes." He placed a hand on my shoulder, the touch warm and sure. "Then lead we will, together." As we stood there in the quiet night, the future unfurled before us, not as a threat, but as a promise. The battles were fought, the walls were secured, the heart of the pack was strong and beating true.
The girl who had been left in the rain was gone. In her place stood the anchor of Shadowfen, rooted deep with her pack, her family, standing strong all around her. And their story was just beginning. 5 years. In the life of a pack, it is the blink of an eye. In the life of a forest, it is nothing at all. But in the life of a heart that has finally found its home, 5 years is a lifetime of sunrises, of changing seasons, of quiet joys and hard-won peace. Shadowfen territory had not just endured, it had flourished. The alliance with High Crag had proven strong and wise, leading to pacts with 2 other neighboring packs who valued stability over expansion. We were no longer the isolated, wary pack at the edge of the wilderness. We were a cornerstone of a peaceful, prosperous region known for our strength, our fairness, and the profound, grounding presence at our core. My anchor abilities had matured from a startling new sense into a second nature. I could feel the health of the territory like my own heartbeat. I knew when a blight threatened the southern pines before the first needle turned brown. I could sense the joyful energy of a successful hunt miles away, and the subtle anxiety of a patrol encountering something unusual. The web of bonds was no longer just something I felt. It was something I tended, a living tapestry I helped weave stronger with each passing day. My relationships with the brothers had deepened into something unshakable and beautifully distinct. With Silas, it was a partnership of quiet understanding. We were the keepers of the pack's spirit.
He taught me the old histories, the wolf lore that was not written in books, but carried in the memory of the land. Together, we designed new rituals that honored our unique pack: a spring festival celebrating renewal, a winter ceremony honoring resilience. We would sit for hours in the forest or the library, speaking little, our shared sense of the pack's emotional landscape a constant, comfortable conversation between us. Ronan remained my fierce protector and my most challenging teacher, but the edges had softened, replaced by a profound, brotherly loyalty. He led the pack's defenses, and I was now a part of that strategy. My ability to sense disturbances made me an invaluable early warning system. We trained the younger pack members together, he teaching them combat, I teaching them to sense the pack bonds, to fight as one entity rather than a collection of individuals. His gruff praise, "Not bad, Anchor," had become one of my most treasured sounds. And Kalen, our bond was the bedrock. He was the alpha, the leader, the steady hand on the tiller. I was the anchor, the center, the calm in the storm. We governed together. He handled external politics, trade, the hard decisions of justice. I focused on internal harmony, welfare, the soul of our people. Our counsels were a balance of his pragmatic wisdom and my intuitive understanding of our people's needs. We were a matched set, his strength and my stability creating a whole far greater than the sum of its parts. The deep respect between us had grown into a trust so absolute it needed no words. There was no grand romance, no dramatic confession. There was something better. A chosen family built on unwavering loyalty, mutual respect, and a love for our pack that bound us together more surely than any fate ever could. The final formal seal on this new era was the ceremony of the rooting, an ancient tradition revived for the first time in living memory for an anchor who had chosen her pack. It was not a mating ceremony. It was a declaration of permanent spiritual belonging, a vow between an anchor and her pack, and between the pack and its anchor. The entire territory prepared. Packs from our alliances, High Crag, the River Folk, the Pine Watch, arrived as honored guests. The clearing where I had first truly felt my power, now a maintained ceremonial ground, was decorated with garlands of evergreen and wildflowers. On the day of the ceremony, I wore a simple gown the color of forest moss, embroidered by Maeve and the other pack women, with symbols of unity and growth. My hair was loose. I wore no shoes. I was to be grounded to the earth. The entire pack and our guests formed a great circle around the oldest tree in Shanofen, known as the Sentinel. Kalen, Ronan, and Silas stood before it, dressed in formal tunics, their faces solemn with pride. I walked into the circle alone, feeling every eye on me, but feeling no fear. Only a rightness, as steady as the earth beneath my bare feet. I stopped before the sentinel and placed my hands on its ancient, fissured bark. I could feel its immense, slow life, a patient giant that had seen centuries pass. Kalen stepped forward, his voice clear and strong, carried to the edges of the clearing. 5 winters passed, a soul arrived at our border, cast out and broken. We saw not a burden, but a missing piece, not a victim, but a strength waiting to wake. Today, that soul stands before us, whole and mighty. Elara, you chose Shadowfen in the rain. You chose us in the courtroom. You choose us every day with your courage and your heart. Does the pack choose you in return? A roar went up from every Shadowfen throat, a unified, powerful yes that shook the leaves on the trees. Ronan stepped forward next. You have fought for this pack. You have bled for it. You have healed its wounds and sharpened its claws. Will you stand as its shield, its anchor in every storm to come? I turned from the tree to face him, my voice strong. I will. Silas took the final step. His voice was softer, but it pierced the silence like a clear bell.
You have felt our joys and our sorrows. You have woven our spirits together. Will you be the heart of this pack, the root from which we all grow, now and for all the days that follow? Tears, happy and free, streamed down my face. I will. Then it was my turn. I faced the gathered pack, my family. You gave me a home when I had none. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. You are my strength, my purpose, my life. I vow to be your root, to hold you fast, to nourish you, to be forever yours. As I finished, I knelt and pressed my palms flat against the rich, dark soil at the base of the sentinel. I closed my eyes and let my anchor sense flow out, not in a pulse, but in a gentle, permanent infusion. I connected my essence to the land, to the ley lines of power that ran beneath Shadowfen, to the very soul of the territory. I felt the connection click into place, eternal and unbreakable. A soft, golden light, visible to all, a true manifestation of anchor power, emanated from my hands and seeped into the earth, causing the wildflowers at the edge of the clearing to bloom in an instant, brilliant burst of color. A collective gasp of wonder rose from the crowd. I stood. The ceremony was complete. I was not just in Shadowfen, I was of it, a living part of its spirit. The solemnity shattered into joyous celebration. Music sprang up. Food and drink appeared. Children danced. Wolves and humans mingled, laughing. Allies clasped our hands, their congratulations filled with genuine awe. As the feast wore on, I found a moment of quiet at the edge of the clearing, watching my pack rejoice. Kaelin came to stand beside me, Ronan and Silas joining him a moment later. We stood together, a united front, watching the future we had built. "It's perfect," I murmured. "It's just the beginning," Kaelin said, his shoulder brushing mine. "Good," Ronan said, a contented smirk on his face. Silas just smiled, his eyes holding a depth of happiness that words could never capture. I looked out at the laughing faces, the dancing flames, the sentinel tree standing guard over us all. I thought of the scared, hollow girl in the rain. I thought of the poison, the fear, the feeling of being less than nothing. That girl was gone. She had been healed by this land, by these wolves, by this love. In her place stood Alara, the anchor of Shadowfen, rooted, strong, loved. The moon rose, silver and bright, washing the clearing in a peaceful light. A howl lifted into the night, a young pack member, full of joy and belonging. It was answered by another, and another, until the very stars seemed to ring with the song of my pack, my home, my forever. And as I added my own voice to the chorus, a clear, harmonic note of pure, anchored joy, I knew with every fiber of my being that the greatest story wasn't about punishment or salvation. It was about finding where you belong and having the courage to put down roots and grow. The end.